There are several ways to knit two at a time. In this video, I'm going to show you how to knit two at a time using the magic loop method and the cable cast on. To cast on two at a time, you will need 2 balls of yarn, or you'll need to work from both ends of the same ball. So using a circular needle that's at least 24 inches long, cast on half of the stitches for your first item, which is what I've done here, and slide them down and pick up another working yarn. It can either be from a second ball or the other end of the same ball that you used for the first half of the stitches for your first item. And you're going to cast on all of the stitches for your second item. So you've got your first half the stitches for your first item here. Now you're going to just leave them dangle down there while you cast on for your second item all of the stitches. In this case, I am working on the Goat Whisperers cabled fingerless mitts, which requires 50 cast on stitches. So I am casting on, I've casted on 25 for the first mitt, and now I'm casting on all 50 for the second mitt. As you are knitting two at a time, you will always use one yarn for the one item and a different yarn for the second item. You do have to be careful, not so much in a cast on here, but as you are knitting, to remember to change yarns when you change from knitting from your one item to your second item. Otherwise you'll knit them together. And the only way to fix that is to unknit and fix it. You can use this method for socks, gloves, sleeves, anything that's done in pairs, and it's great because I like doing them two at a time because I know both pieces of the pair are turning out exactly the same. I don't know that there's a time efficiency for knitting two at a time, but I do like it for its consistency in having two identical items. Now you can use a 24-inch needle for knitting two at a time. Most experts recommend you use at least a 32-inch needle. I have found for smaller circumferences like gloves, I do sometimes prefer to use a 24-inch needle. The downside to using a 24-inch needle is that because you're knitting two at a time, you've got a bunch of stitches on it, and sometimes they can slip off the tip. So with the 32-inch needle, you have a little more cord and you don't have as much issue with the stitches slipping off of the tips of your needles. I do encourage you strongly to be comfortable knitting the magic loop method with one item before you attempt to knit the magic loop method two at a time. It is a fiddly method, knitting two at a time. It is totally doable, as you will see. So I've finished casting on for my second item, so I have all of the cast on stitches here for the second item, half of the cast on stitches hanging out down here in the cord for the first item. To continue this cast on, I'm going to push the stitches to the other end of the needle and put my first cast on up on the needle. The other ones can hang out on the cord. And the working yarn is now at the bottom of your stitches rather than up at the top. The tail is up here at the top. I'm going to twist my stitches so they're all lined up. I'm going to hold this needle in my left hand still, and using my right hand empty needle, I'm going to go down here and find the last cast on stitch. And sometimes you have to pick at it because they can get, that last one can get twisted with the next to last one. So sometimes it is, yeah, there it is. It is the second, it looks like it's the second one down. That's just a idiosyncrasy, I don't know, is that the right word, of this cast on. Of course, if I wasn't doing this on camera, I could do it very quickly and easily, right? Murphy's Law. I'm on camera, so I'm having a hard time with it. Okay, now I got that last cast on stitch. Let's get all those stitches lined up. It's not imperative, I guess, that they're lined up right now. I just like to have them lined up. So now I have that first stitch nice and loose, so I know where it is. I'm going to insert my empty needle into that stitch. So here we go. So you want to get under both strands of that stitch. So I'm still going just like I was before in between the top stitch and the second stitch, but it's just a little bit weird because it's at the base of my needle now. So I'm in that stitch. I'm going to pick up a loop, and you kind of have to twist your needles around to pull that loop up through. So this is just another cast on stitch just like the other ones. It just looks different because of where we're doing it. So now I'm going to put my tips upward and just switch hands. So now the nearly empty needle is in my left hand, and the one with all the stitches in my right hand. I'm going to pull that needle out of those stitches so that I can use it to continue the cast on. Push it up toward the tip, get these other stitches out of the way. There we go. Now I'm going to go underneath the stitch I just made to pick up the next stitch, because this is actually going between this stitch and the last stitch. It just looks different because the two stitches are on separate needles. I'm going to pull that last stitch tight by pulling on the current loop, which pulls this stitch tight, and then put that new stitch back on the left needle like we've always been doing. Now we're going to continue the cast on like normal. So I go between the two stitches, pull up a loop, put it back on the left needle, and I continue this way for the remainder of the stitches in the cast on. So what's going to happen is you're going to end up with the first half of the stitches over here on the cord, and the second half of the stitches are going to be on this needle. When you're done casting on for your first item, this is what it should look like. You've got half of your cast on stitches on this needle, half of your cast on stitches on the cord. All of the cast on stitches for the second mitt is down on the cord. I put a stitch marker in here to mark the halfway point. Just for expedience in this video, normally I would count my stitches in the next step. You'll see what I mean. You don't have to put a stitch marker in like that. So now the next step is to go down here and make sure we don't drop them off the tip. I like to push them down. But then find the halfway point in your cast on for your second item, which I've marked with my stitch marker. Bend the cord and pull that cord out between those two stitches, just like you do in the normal method of magic loop knitting when you're just doing it with one item. So I'm pulling that cord out so that I can start the magic loop method, and I'm going to push stitches up on both needles. So I have a nice big loop out the bottom there. And now we have to position our stitches to get ready to join in the round. So here's my working yarn. I'm going to put that on the right. When you're knitting in the round, I have a saying, if your working yarn's not on the right needle, it's wrong. When you're working in the round, and you lay down your work, if you forget where you're at when you pick it back up, you just got to know that the working yarn should always be coming off of the right needle. If it's not coming off of the right needle, then it's wrong. If it's not right, it's wrong. Okay, now position your stitches just like you do knitting in the round normally, with them all turned toward the center, and making sure you don't have a twist. I'm moving my second cast on down a little bit so I can see this first one better. Making sure I don't have them twisted here at the bottom. I like to lay my needles out flat like that and make sure the cast on is nice and consistent across that bridge, because sometimes you can twist it around accidentally, and if you lay them out flat like this, you'll see that it's twisted right there. So it's not twisted right there, so that's good. I continue up my left needle, positioning those stitches all towards the center, making sure they're not twisted. And again, this is just like knitting one at a time. in the round, just making sure it's not twisted. Get my tail back there. Now I'm ready to join to knit in the round. Now I'm going to pull my right needle out of the stitches so that I have slack to work the magic loop method. And I'm going to knit the first round according to the pattern directions. In this case, I'm making the Goat Whisperer's cabled fingerless mitts. The first row is purl 2, knit 3 across. So I'm going to do that the whole way across the first half of this round, and then I'll continue with the second mitt. Okay, I'm at the end of the first half of the first round of my first mitt. So those are the last 3 stitches. Now I'm ready to start the second mitt. Now it's just hanging out here in the cord. There's the loop I pulled out. I'm going to pull the stitches up onto my needle so the tail is at the needle tip. That's my tail. And the working yarn, I'm going to let go of this right needle for a minute. The working yarn is over here on the cord, which is kind of weird. But if you think about it, it is the same as knitting one at a time. If you had slid your stitches on the right hand needle down onto the cord, your working yarn would be on the right cord. Just like when you're knitting one at a time, the working yarn is coming off of the right needle. The working yarn in this case is coming off the cord, but you're holding one needle in your left hand, so the cord is on the right. And we've got to untwist these stitches, which can be a little bit tricky, as you can see. All right, got those untwisted. Again, I'm laying them flat across the join here to make sure that they're not twisted across where they transition from the needle to the cord. So they're not twisted. So now I'm going to work up from there to untwist the stitches. Okay, let's get those first mitt stitches out of the way. And here we are. Tail. Get out of the way, tail. Okay. Here's the top. There we go. I got to the top of the second mitt. Now, I've got my working yarn all twisted around the cord here, so I'm just going to untwist that. There we go. So now I've got my stitches all untwisted. I've got half the stitches on the cord and half of the stitches on my left needle. I've got my first mitt stitches hanging out here, and now my halfway point for those stitches is here where my cord is. So I'm gonna, or here, there where my tail is, I mean, so I'm going to pull, uh-oh, did you see that? I just about pulled my stitches off the tip there. I'm going to pull my loop out there. So now I've got my first mitt stitches are right here. Some are on the needle, some are on the cord. If you have a longer cord, they could all be down on the cord. I am working with a short cord, and this is one of the downfalls of working with a 24-inch cord, is you don't have much loop here. When you work with a 32-inch longer or cord, you have more loop. So now the second stitches, just making sure I didn't accidentally twist them when I was fooling around with my first mitt. There we go. Okay, got all the stitches in the middle. They're untwisted. Now I'm going to start knitting my second mitt. Be careful to make sure you've got the yarn for your second mitt. You didn't accidentally pick up the yarn from your first mitt. And start knitting in the round. I know it's a little bit weird because the stitches are on your cord from the first half and you've got your first mitt stitches kind of holding in your right hand there, or if you've got a longer cord they might be down on the cord and you're not holding them in your hand. And look at that, I just about made a mistake. I'm supposed to purl that first stitch. All right, there we go. I'm going to purl 2, knit 3 the whole way around this mitt. So we worked the first half of the first mitt, but we're working the entire second mitt at one time. All right, I got done the first half of the round for my second mitt, and I've got to reposition the stitches because again this is magic loop. So now I'm pulling the second half of the second mitt up onto my needle. Now I have all of the stitches for the second mitt on my needles and all of the stitches for the first mitt down on the cord. Okay, so being careful still that I'm not twisting it, because in these early rounds, whether you're knitting 1 at a time or 2 at a time, it's easy to twist them. So every time I reposition things, I kind of check to make sure that I haven't twisted them around accidentally. And I'm going to continue knitting the second half of my second mitt. Okay, I've finished knitting the second half of my second mitt, so now I've gone the whole way around the second mitt. But now remember, we've only done the first half of the first mitt. So I'm going to pull that one back up onto the needles. I'm going to let go of my right hand needle for a moment. And I'm going to check the stitches on my first mitt to make sure I haven't gotten them twisted. Oops, there we go. And I know that looks like a long ladder in there, but it's because these stitches got pulled small on the cable. That will shorten up to a normal length stitch as I knit. Okay, so I don't think anything's twisted. So now, just like we did for the second mitt earlier, we've got the working yarn coming off of the cord. So I'm going to take my other needle and then I'm going to knit the stitches that are on the needle here. In this case, I'm going to purl 2, knit 3 till I get to the end of the round. So after you've completed one round of knitting, this is what it should look like. You should have your complete second mitt down here on the cord connected in the round. and your complete first mitt or first item up here toward the needle tips. You can slide it all down onto the cord, but it is all connected and to knit in the round as well. You will continue knitting in the round just like I showed you in that first round. Every round from here on out is the same. Your working yarn, remember, if you put it down, your working yarn should be coming off the right hand needle, so you're always going to hold that needle in your right hand and slide the other needles up, or the other stitches up onto the needle, and you're going to check to make sure you don't have them twisted. Pull your right hand needle out and then continue knitting down this needle to work in the round.